For millennia, there has been a fascination with ancient Egypt, from the Romans all the way through to modern times. Even by the time the Romans arrived, the vast majority of the tombs, temples and cities were already thousands of years old. Alexander the Great, Caesar and Napoleon are just a few of the historic figures captivated by this ancient civilization. And whilst every so often interest may wane, as soon as a new discovery is made, interest quickly returns. And nothing has brought more interest than the mummies. We are fascinated at how the Egyptians figured out ways to preserve their dead so well as the extravagant tombs which they built for the pharaohs. And alongside this is another concept which grabs our attention: curses. There have been numerous books, movies and TV shows based on stories of the long dead returning to the world of the living to wreak revenge on those who dare to disturb their final resting place. And no mummy's curse has grabbed our attention more than that of Tutankhamun. This is what we know. It is not truly known where the concept of the tombs of ancient Egypt being protected by curses came from. In fact, there is little evidence to suggest the Egyptians themselves believed in curses. Rather, they believed in protecting the soul after death. This was achieved by writing protective spells on the walls of the tombs. It is possible later explorers and visitors to Egypt and these tombs, having no understanding of the hieroglyphics and the odd way the bodies had been preserved, jumped to conclusions. There are also stories of grave robbers who became ill after breaking into the tombs, though as there is no concrete evidence to support this, these stories could just be rumours passed through the ages as cautionary tales told to warn people away and to protect the dead. The earliest example we have on record comes from 1699. Louis Penisher wrote about a Polish traveller who purchased two mummies whilst visiting Alexandria. Whilst he was transporting them at sea, the man began to be haunted by visions of two spectres. The ship was also met with stormy seas which hampered the journey. The traveller soon threw the mummies overboard and the visions ceased and the seas calmed almost immediately. The accuracy of his tale is put in question by the lack of a first-hand account. It was not until the 19th century when interest in Egypt really began to take off. The hieroglyphics were translated and we began to understand what was written on the walls of the tombs. Whilst it turned out most tombs did not carry curses, especially those belonging to the pharaohs, a few curses were found on private tombs from the Old Kingdom. For the most part, these merely threatened judgment upon anyone who disturbed the tomb, either by the owner or the gods themselves. Some examples include: "As for any man who will make a disturbance, I shall be judged with him. A crocodile be against him in the water, a snake be against him on land. He who would do anything against this tomb, never did I do a thing against him. It is the God who will judge." Some were slightly more creative. The so-called donkey curse threatened anyone who violated the tomb to be violated by a donkey. A more elaborate curse from the 18th dynasty threatened anyone disturbing the tomb to lose their earthly possessions and honours, be incinerated in a furnace of execration rites, capsize and drown at sea, have no successors, receive no tomb or funerary offerings of their own, and their bodies would decay because they will starve without sustenance and their bones will perish. In a way, the popularity of the belief of mummy's curse can be linked to two things: the translation of the hieroglyphics and the Victorians' growing interest in the occult. In 1821, a show took place near Piccadilly Circus, London, in which a mummy was unwrapped in front of a live audience. The author, Jane Loudon Webb, was inspired by this and wrote a story called The Mummy, in which an angry mummy comes back to life to enact revenge. Over the years, other similar stories and eventually movies followed. A fascination with owning foreign and ancient artifacts continued to grow, leading to many more mummies being unwrapped or destroyed. The growing interest in the occult during the 19th century also meant that ghost stories became popular. But sometimes, stories and the truth can become merged. In the late 1890s, 4 Englishmen visiting Luxor were offered the chance to purchase a mummy case which contained the remains of the Princess of Amun-Ra, who lived around 3,500 years ago. After drawing lots, one of the men paid several £1,000s for the coffin. Just hours after having it brought to his hotel room, he walked into the desert and was never seen again. The next day, an Egyptian servant accidentally shot one of the other men in the arm, leading it to being amputated. The bank holding the savings of the third man failed, and the fourth lost his job, ending up selling matches. Somehow, the coffin made its way to England, being purchased by a businessman. After a house fire and 3 family members being injured in a road accident, he donated it to the British Museum. Whilst being unloaded, the truck it was aboard suddenly reversed, trapping a passerby. 2 workers were then bringing it upstairs when one fell, breaking his leg. The other suddenly died 2 days later. Things would get weirder after the mummy was on display. A night watchman would hear hammering and sobbing from inside the coffin. Other exhibits would get thrown around, another watchman died on duty, and cleaners refused to go near it. A visitor threw a cloth at the coffin, and soon after, his child died of measles. The mummy was then moved to the basement, and within a week, one of the men who had moved it was seriously ill, and the supervisor was dead. After the papers began to hear the story, a photographer took a picture of the case. Upon development, the painting had been replaced by a human face. The photographer, then apparently so horrified by what he saw, shot himself. The museum sold it to a private collector, who moved it to the attic after the misfortune and deaths continued. After being advised to get rid of the mummy as soon as possible, the collector sold it to an American archaeologist. In April 1912, he escorted his new purchase aboard the Titanic, which subsequently sunk, taking 1,500 passengers and the mummy with it. Whilst being a thrilling story and one of the prime examples of mummy curses, is there any truth to this tale? Unfortunately, no. The mummy in question is not actually a mummy, rather an ornate coffin lid. Nor is there a such thing as the Princess of Amun-Ra. Amun-Ra being the name of a god rather than a place, meaning it was more likely she was a priestess. A check of the Titanic's cargo manifest in 1985 provided no evidence of a mummy or the coffin lid being aboard. In fact, it is still on display at the British Museum today. The story was actually created by William Stead and Douglas Murray. They told a story of a mummy which wreaked havoc wherever it went, inspired by a visit to the British Museum where they would have seen the lid. William Stead was aboard the Titanic when it sank, going down with the ship. Some survivors recounted Stead telling other passengers the story on the ship, which may have led to the two becoming merged in legend. That story shows us just how easy it is for the truth and fiction to become one, and our next example is probably the best example of this, as well as the most well-known curse of all time, the curse of Tutankhamun. Tutankhamun was pharaoh of Egypt between 1334 and 1325 BC, being just 8 or 9 when he ascended to the throne, ruling until his death at around 18. He was buried in the Valley of the Kings in an unusually small tomb, indicating an unexpected death. It was robbed twice within a couple of months of burial, then remained undisturbed for thousands of years, with its location being lost after it was buried by debris from other tombs. It remained hidden for over 3,000 years when, in November 1922, it was rediscovered by a team led by Howard Carter. Not long after this, Carter sent a messenger to his house. As he approached the house, the messenger claimed to hear a faint cry, almost human. He investigated and found the bird cage in which Carter's canary was housed was occupied by a cobra, the bird having been eaten by the snake and dying in its mouth. In ancient Egypt, the cobra was the symbol of the monarchy. Many interpreted this as the royal cobra breaking into Carter's house, beginning the first rumours of a curse being unleashed. These rumours grew after the events of 5th of April 1923. George Herbert, 5th Earl of Carnarvon, one of the chief financial backers of the dig and among the first to enter the tomb, died after a mosquito bite became infected and developed pneumonia. At the time of his death, Cairo suffered a total blackout and his dog, which was still in England, began to howl. For years after, people associated with the dig and discovery of the tomb, who visited or even studied the mummy and treasures of Tutankhamun, met misfortune and death. George J. Gould died of a fever not long after visiting the tomb. A.C. Mace, a member of the excavation team, died in 1928 of arsenic poisoning. Carter's secretary, Richard Bethel, who walked behind Carter as they entered the tomb, was found smothered in 1929, and radiologist Sir Archibald Douglas Reed x-rayed the mummy in 1924, dying just days later. Then, in 1972, to commemorate the 50th anniversary of the tomb's discovery, some of the treasures were sent around the world. Some crates were on an RAF Britannia aircraft when an officer kicked the crate containing the royal mask of King Tut. He broke the leg 2 years later. Another crew member got divorced a few years after, whilst 2 others had heart attacks. All of them blamed the curse. With all of this tragedy, it is easy to understand why some people would blame a curse. But is there any evidence one exists? Well, not exactly. Of the 26 people present at the opening of the tomb, 6 were dead within 10 years. 22 were present at the opening of the sarcophagus and 2 died within 10 years. And none of the 10 present at the unwrapping died within 10 years. Howard Carter, the first man to enter the tomb and would surely have been one of the first victims, did not die until 1939. Lord Carnarvon had been in poor health for many years before his death. Rumours that King Tut had also had a mosquito bite in the same spot were unproven. Many others associated with the dig went on to live long and happy lives. One common theory for people who disturb the tombs falling ill is that mummies and tombs can contain dangerous and poisonous moulds built up after thousands of years of decaying food and flesh. When a tomb is opened, these moulds can be disturbed, then breathed in by those who enter, and can lead to health issues or even death. Those who are already ill, such as Lord Carnarvon, would in this instance be more likely to die. If other people who became ill or died after disturbing mummies in the past, particularly in the superstitious Victorian era, people would be more likely to blame it on a curse. What the case of Tutankhamun shows is that how mere rumour and superstition can be blown out of proportion to the point where they distort the truth, sometimes because they are simply more interesting, exciting, and sell more than the truth ever will. I'll leave you with one more short tale. In 1890, William John Warner, also known as Count Louis Hammond, was in Luxor. Whilst there, he cured a sheikh who had malaria. The grateful sheikh handed Count Hammond a gift, the mummified hand of an Egyptian princess. Upon returning home, his wife insisted he got rid of it. After failing to find a museum to take it, the hand was placed into a safe in his home. Many years later, in 1922, they opened the safe and found not a mummified hand, but a fresh one, the shriveled skin replaced with new soft flesh. His wife insisted it be destroyed and Hammond agreed. They gave the hand a proper funeral where Hammond read a passage from the Book of the Dead. He laid the hand in the fireplace and closed the book. At this moment there was a clap of thunder and the house was engulfed in darkness. The door was blown open by a strong wind and the figure of a woman entered the room, wearing the royal apparel of old Egypt. Her right arm was missing the hand. She bent over the fireplace and disappeared along with the hand. Count Hammond wrote of this encounter shortly after in a letter to a close friend, also saying, In the name of God, I beg you to take care. The ancient Egyptians had knowledge and power which we people today do not understand. His friend was Lord Carnarvon. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, it would be greatly appreciated if you could leave a like and share. If you'd like to see more videos like this, then please subscribe and hit the notification bell to be notified when I upload. I also have a Patreon, where you can help support this channel. In return for your support, you will receive early access to videos and the opportunity to help choose topics for future videos. The link to this can be found in the description below. Thank you again for watching, and I hope to see you again soon.